OpenAI's acquisition of TBPN removes one of Silicon Valley's most influential independent platforms for corporate accountability. Until this deal, TBPN operated on a $30 million independent advertising business. This revenue structure forced the show to answer to the open market, rather than a single tech monopoly. OpenAI leveraged its massive $122 billion funding to completely absorb the show and immediately terminate its independent advertising contracts. By cutting off the show's financial diversity, OpenAI has converted a tech watchdog into a wholly owned subsidiary of its own strategy department. The primary driver behind this acquisition is OpenAI's preparation for an $852 billion initial public offering. Protecting a valuation of that scale requires absolute market confidence, leading the company to construct what critics describe as a narrative firewall. This chart compares OpenAI's $852 billion IPO target against TBPN's annual revenue. Buying the show costs a fraction of a percent of its valuation. Replacing fragmented ad revenue with a single check ends the host's need to satisfy multiple market players. Journalistic independence effectively vanishes when the subject of the reporting becomes the only entity paying the bills. The official claim of editorial independence provides a layer of public relations cover, but the internal reporting structure tells a different story. The show now reports directly to Chris Lehane, OpenAI's head of global affairs and a veteran political operative. A conflict exists when a media outlet's chain of command leads to a corporate officer, whose primary job is to protect the company's brand and valuation. OpenAI's media strategy has shifted from traditional press relations to direct ownership of the channels that cover its industry. CEO Sam Altman, a frequent guest on the show, orchestrated the acquisition of his favorite tech media property. Hosts John Coogan and Jordy Hayes are trading their status as independent media entrepreneurs for corporate roles within OpenAI's strategy unit. This transition moves them from being industry observers to being part of the very organization they once critiqued. When an industry watchdog moves onto the payroll of the company it covers, the public loses a vital source of outside scrutiny. The independent media landscape is shrinking as major AI labs move to bring influential voices in-house. Lennox Lenny Graves Irvine spent 20 years leading M&A for global media conglomerates, tracking exactly how corporate narratives are captured. Graves Irvine will provide a breakdown of how the TBPN deal fits into a broader pattern of corporate narrative control. This acquisition sets a precedent for how tech giants may attempt to manage public perception ahead of the largest IPOs in history. OpenAI now owns the most influential tech show, effectively controlling the voice that helps the public understand its technology. In the upcoming studio debate, moderator Morgan Hayes will facilitate the discussion between Graves Irvine and the current media reality. The following exchange reveals the tension between corporate narrative and independent criticism.
Lenny, you're treating a media acquisition like a crime scene. OpenAI just raised $122 billion. Why is buying a tech show any different than Bezos buying The Post or Larry Ellison backing his son at CNN?
Because Bezos bought a business, Morgan. Sam Altman just bought a Muzzle. TBPN was on track to clear $30 million in revenue this year. The second OpenAI took the keys, they killed the ad business. Think about that. You don't execute $30 million in profit unless the silence you're buying is worth billions in valuation insurance.
Silence? The co-founders, Coogan and Hayes, are literally shouting about an editorial independence covenant. They say the money gives them the resources to be more critical. Why is it always a conspiracy with you?
Independence isn't a pinky swear, it's structural. They report to Chris Lehane. This is a man who made his name in the Clinton war room. He is a political cleaner. You don't report to a fixer to find the truth. You report to him to win the news cycle. The gravity of $800 billion in capital bends every word they speak. They aren't journalists anymore. They're narrative assets.
But look at the history. Altman funded Coogan's first company in 2013. They are family. Is it a Muzzle or just a 10-year partnership finally scaling up? Maybe Altman just wants his friends to have the best tools in the game.
The family dynamic is the poison. It's the cozy club. These guys are venture-backed founders who sold their souls for a payout. George Hammond at the FT says it's in the hundreds of millions. They aren't critiquing the machine. They've become the machine's new front end. They are the official court stenographers for the AI gods.
Wait, stenographers, TBPN, only get 70,000 viewers. In a world of Joe Rogan, that's a rounding error. Why spend 200 million on a niche live stream? It feels like an overpayment for a status symbol. OpenAI's version of a Rolex.
It's not about the quantity of the viewers, it's about the concentration. Those 70,000 are the regulators, the investors, the elite founders. If you control the water supply at the source, you don't need to control the whole ocean. By subsidizing TBPN with infinite capital, they make it impossible for a bootstrapped creator to compete. It's a monoculture, Morgan. They're salting the earth for anyone who wants to tell a different story.
You're being cynical. Figisimo says they want a constructive conversation to combat the hysteria in the comments. Isn't owning the channel just the most efficient way to explain AGI to a public that is clearly terrified?
Calling criticism hysteria is exactly why we should be terrified. This is a preemptive strike before their IPO. They need a pristine, curated vibe to sell to retail investors who don't know an LLM from a toaster. They are building a narrative firewall to protect an $800 billion valuation. It's an arbitrage of truth.
Let's talk about the unknowns. Lenny, you spent 20 years building these corporate cages. You're mad because you didn't pocket the commission on this deal. Why should we trust your integrity audit over Sam Altman's vision?
Because I've written those internal memos. I know how the game is rigged. They're going to use 3,000 hours of elite interviews to train their own AI journalism models. They're automating the very art of the corporate spin. We're entering a hall of mirrors where every major lab, Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, buys their own newsroom. Truth becomes a byproduct of market share.
You're shouting. It's just a podcast, Lenny.
It is the infrastructure of reality. If you can't see the difference between a whistleblower and a machine-owned megaphone, then you're already captured, Morgan. You're a mark, a total mark.
Enough. We've covered the ground. Lenny says it's an arbitrage of truth. OpenAI says it's a constructive space. The truth is probably being hoovered into a dataset while you're watching this. We're done. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below.